Hey there, content creators. Welcome to Household Filmmaking. I am Christopher Moonlight, and we're just shooting from the hip here today because I'm here with my good friend, Clint Carney, the writer, producer, and star of Dry Blood, and also prop master, visual effects artist, and the lead man of System Sin. It has a new album out at the moment called Once Upon a Second Act, which is awesome, and he did an amazing music video for it, which we're going to talk about today, along with a bunch of other stuff. We're just doing a conversation here. This is kind of an informal interview or whatever you want to call it, because we always talk and we have interesting things to say, and I think you, my listeners, will have a lot of stuff to glean from this if you are a content creator or aspiring filmmaker or special effects artist or whatever, because the times they are a changin', and if you are into open source and technology, for the better. And Clint knows a lot about that, so I'm going to stop talking for a moment and say, hey, Clint, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
So, yeah, again, I'm kind of hoping that we can recapture the magic of our last phone conversation, because I think the last time I was just, once I got off the phone with you, I'm like, there's so much cool stuff we can do as filmmakers, and you know, you're doing it and I'm doing it, and the technology is becoming more widely available, and like black magic cameras, open source software, like that's where you're at the moment, right? You're definitely like you've gone from like props and practical effects to being kind of a Blender enthusiast.
You know, I'm both still. I still do a lot of prop work, but leaning into the visual effects lately. As you know, I recently, in the last couple of years, discovered an open source program called Blender. I don't know that it's open source so much as it's just free. It's a free software.
It is actually open source software. Now, open source, I guess we should kind of, because not everybody knows this, but open source is essentially programmers go out there and they kind of go like, in the case of Blender, they go, wow, you can spend thousands of dollars on Maya or Cinema 4D, but we can actually program our own version of it and put it out on the internet. We'll put it out for free. And other developers can work on it and help to improve it. The only criteria really is that you can't repackage it and try and sell it. You got to keep it free, and the people will sell like plugins and add-ons and that sort of thing. But
yeah, I think Blender. I don't think the public is openly coding Blender so much as they have a development team, but then people are doing plugins for it that then can work with Blender, and a lot of them are free as well, and some of them are pay, but they're all pretty reasonably priced. But it's it's just a great filmmaking tool. You can do so much with it. I mean, having done visual effects for the last few years professionally, I was just a big After Effects guy, so I was mostly focused on 2D compositing. And then when I had to do some 3D modeling, or if I was doing some compositing a 3D object, I would usually still use After Effects and use the Video Copilot plugin. What the hell is it called now?
Oh, it's hold on, Element 3D.
Element 3D, yeah. Since I and I've dabbled a bit in ZBrush, Cinema 4D, and that stuff, but Blender kind of does it all, and it's absolutely free, and it's insane. Yeah, you can. It's a film studio, in a box, basically. Hold on a sec. Sorry, my.
No problem.
Let me set my phone here to not doing this, because my phone just goes off all day. Let me see if there's a way to prevent it from interrupting the call. Okay.
Yeah, you just turn off your notifications. No problem.
Yeah, there we go. Sorry about that. So anyway, what was I saying?
Well, with the open source, now I should also kind of preface for anyone that's not familiar with programs like Blender is, it used to be that Blender was kind of, it's free, but it wasn't very intuitive. And the latest versions are very intuitive, and you can't get support for Blender because there's a large community of people that if you're having problems with it, they'll help you fix a problem, or there's tons of tutorials. So, and it's kind of, it used to be, everyone used to say, well, it's indie, it's not industry standard, but even like big productions are using Blender now.
Yeah, it's great. And, for your audience who may not be familiar with it exactly, just to kind of go over what it can do. I mean, you can build entire sets in Blender. You can composite footage together. You can build 3D objects, do all kinds of particle animation, physics simulations. You can use it to develop games with. You can do traditional 2D animation in it. And for me, I also use it in props as well. I can design a prop in it and then output the file and 3D print the file. So,
yeah, and that's I guess, another thing like you said about Blender is you can do compositing, you can sculpt 3D objects. There's a I don't know what you call it exactly, a subsection of Blender called Grease Pencil, where you can do 2D animation, you can draw pictures, and you can use 3D models and then trace the 3D models as pictures, lighting. You can pretty much do everything. And I wouldn't say I'm what?
I was going to say, check this out. I have right next to me a blaster that I just made, and this I modeled in Blender, and then I just 3D printed it and painted it afterwards. And it's a little meant to look like it belongs in the Star Wars world, although it is obviously a little bit of an homage to the Greedo killer, but it's its own thing. But anyway, made it in Blender. So.
Looks great, yeah. And I'll link in the description. I'll link to your Instagram where you've posted pictures of that. So because we're audio only, so the picture, which is a shame.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which is a shame because you have a bunch of really awesome stuff behind you, including you just did. I don't want to digress too much from Blender and what we can do with that just yet, but you recently on your own YouTube channel did a really great video where you took this kind of like, I won't call it a dollar store mask, but it was a cheap kind of Creature from the Black Lagoon mask, and you tricked it out and made it look like a professional like showpiece of the Creature from the Black Lagoon. It's right behind you, and it looks fantastic. I mean, I was really, at first I was like, well, like how much can you do with that? What's a paint job going to do for that? And then you like broke out some resin and just like really did a nice job with it. So I'll definitely link to your YouTube channel as well.
Great.
So people can check that out. But going back to Blender, I mean, I don't know if I'll completely be able to abandon Adobe at some point, but the big problem I have with Adobe at the moment is it's cloud-based. You never stop paying for it. There, used to be, there'd be a new version and you're like, well, I've got this version, I'm fine with that. And they're like, no, now you have to get, you get updates all the time, which is great, but you are paying monthly, yearly, for the life of however long you have it.
Sure. Well, I don't think I'll ever abandon my Adobe subscription. I mean, I even now with a lot, switching a lot of my workflow to Blender, I still use Adobe products every day, so, and there's some things that are just always going to be faster in After Effects than in Blender, but you can use the two together, particle effects I can do just real fast in After Effects, or any kind of motion graphics work, just makes sense to keep that in After Effects, but 3D modeling and sculpting and stuff like that, definitely Blender.
It's I won't go so far to say as I would abandon Adobe, but I kind of want to just because I'm cheap. But no, you're absolutely right. Adobe is very powerful software. I have been dabbling as well in when I got my Blackmagic Pocket 4K, which is an awesome camera, and I'm going to shoot my next feature on those. That came with Davinci Resolve, the professional version.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to learn that for editing because it's supposed to be really great for color. And oh yeah, you got set up there. So yeah, I'm looking forward to. I can't say much about my next feature yet. I can say what we're doing, but I can't say what it is. So we might talk about it in those terms a little bit. But yeah, I think that. Well, you know, keeping on the subject of producing something in Blender and that Blackmagic camera there. So your band System Sin, you cut a new album not too long ago. It's really great. I played your latest song, and I'm blocking on the name of the song that you did the music video for.
Once Upon a Second Act. It's the title track on the
album. Okay. That's why I couldn't think of it, because I kept thinking that and going, no, that's the album. Okay, so that makes. I don't feel so bad that it took you a second to recall it either. We're getting old, man. No, we're still young. You've got better hair than me. So all right. So you did a music video for that. You set up a green screen. You got out your Blackmagic Cinema Pocket camera and you shot it, and then you essentially created everything around you in Blender. And there's animated characters. Am I getting it wrong? Because
that one I shot before I had the new Pocket 6K. This is my third Blackmagic camera actually, so I shot that one on my BMCC 4K, which is the boxy looking Blackmagic camera, one of the old ones.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's a great camera, and I shot. You can shoot 4K on it, and it looks. You can match the footage to the new Pockets just perfectly, and yeah, it's a great camera. And now I use it as my B camera, and the 6K is my A camera. But I just the problem that we're running into now with the coronavirus pandemic, and things are relaxed a little bit. But months ago when I shot that music video, one, I couldn't get a crew to shoot the video with me. Two, I couldn't get a location because all the locations were closed. So I had seen this video on YouTube of a visual effects artist named Ian Hubert, who I know you're familiar with his work too.
Oh, amazing! He's
got a great video where it's just showing. It's a split screen. It shows what he did on the green screen, and then below it is the animation in Blender, and so that kind of inspired me to go that route. So I set up a green screen in my living room, lit it, and filmed it, and just did the whole video, start to finish, one man, just to prove that I could, that I wouldn't be halted by coronavirus. So, shot it on green screen in my living room, and then I popped the footage into my computer, and I basically built all the sets and the additional characters and props and things like that inside Blender.
Yeah, and it was incredible. It was a black and white video, which I thought was, for the mood, was very good. I imagine black and white made it a little easier for you to do color. Well, you're not color matching anything, but
I didn't start out with the intention of doing it black and white. I was going to do color, and I had a color space that I liked, but I started just flipping through the LUTs. In Premiere, I just colored it using the Lumetri color in Premiere. And then I came upon, the black and white LUTs, one of the noir LUTs, and I started fucking with that. And then I had one test shot that is not in the final video that I just colored, and it ended up looking really cool, almost like Anton Corbin, one of his earlier black and white videos. And I just really fell in love with that look. So then I just decided it would be black and white. But also, since it was my first big project with Blender all the way through, it does help matching things if it's black and white. But I didn't rely on the black and white as like a crutch. I tried to get everything pumped in and matched as good as possible in color before I did the final conversion to black and white that way. I just wanted it to feel solid, and then threw some film grain on there and that sort of thing to help further cement it together.
Well, I mean, the thing looked amazing, and for you just by yourself with a green screen behind you and a camera on sticks, it looked like. I mean, let's just face it. If that had come out in the '90s, you would have been winning, MTV Music Awards. I don't know if that's
thanks.
still a thing, but I mean, it's just visually amazing. And one of the things that I thought was really fantastic about it, and I've seen this in tutorials that you can do this, and it still blows my mind, is you did put the camera on sticks, tripod for, the non-slang savvy, and you did camera moves. You did all this, it looked like you had a camera on a crane for some shots, and you were really good about your compositions and putting even 3D elements into the foreground, and you did this amazing, it's like these almost I don't know, they look like vinyl clad characters, and then this amazing mutant fish, and there was just so much visually going on, and like you said, it's proof that, and I hate to sound like the cliche motivational speaker guy, but it's no excuses. There's always something you can do. If you're home, and it's just you, there's still something you can do. And I think the key for any aspiring creator is, just find a way to keep doing it, even if it's not the optimal or the ideal of what you want to do. I think the main thing is just do something.
That I've directed a lot of music videos over the years. Not a ton, but a reasonable amount of music videos over the years. And I am the most happy with that one, which is shocking to me because of how the budget for that video was $200 because I did everything myself. Because I didn't pay a crew, I didn't pay a location. It was all me. So if you add up my time, then it's whatever, it's astronomical. But wise, I made dollar wise, I built that custom mic stand that lit up, and that's the only practical prop in the whole thing, and that's where I spent the money, was building that mic stand. And then everything else was free because it was just my labor, whereas normally, it will be thousands of dollars to make a music video.
Yeah. And not only that, you built a bunch of stuff in Blender. For people who aren't maybe as sculpt savvy as well, they should probably know that there are plenty of artists out there who are putting, sometimes for free, and sometimes they'll charge you, for a download and the license, but it's still very, saves you a lot of work. You can download stuff from other artists and put it in there and light it, and
and if you look at the video too, there's a few models in there that I just bought or that were free, because if it's I needed an old looking television set, and I could model an old looking television set, but I'd rather pay someone $5 for their model and save myself 2 hours. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's $5, or even if it was $20 or $30, would be completely reasonable. Just when you think about what props cost or what you would have spent on, dressing a set, sometimes it's. Go ahead. Sorry.
Exactly that. I look at it in terms of, and I think everyone who does kind of this thing where you're, like you and me and a lot of our friends, where we're just doing our own thing, making our own films. You have to know what you're worth. You have to know your hourly rate or your day rate or whatever, and at least have a rough idea of it. And then when you're up against something that's going to take you an obscene amount of time, and if you start calculating what your time will be worth to make that thing happen, yet there's something else, there's a pre-existing element that you can just purchase and give money to that artist, and for probably less time than you'll put into it. It's totally worth it. You got to make those calculations if you want to get things done. If I modeled every single thing in that video myself, and I did model 70% of it, all right, but if that additional 30% would have pushed me out weeks,
Yeah, and this is something I think a lot of content creators and filmmakers, and a lot of people are getting this, but there's so many libraries out there that you can use, and I think this kind of, and I was guilty of this as well when I first started out. It's no, I've got to create everything. It's it's all got to be original. And now I'm why? Why do I need to, go out and record, I don't know, crunching leaves, or, if somebody's walking through leaves, or sloshing water. And I've done that too. I have my own small library of assets that I've created, and even at some point we'll probably make more of an effort to sell some myself. But you introduced me to, I was telling you I was having trouble with Foley. There's a lot of Foley work to do on my movie, The Quantum Terror. And you said, was it freesound.org?
Yep.
And I was just like astounded that there's this whole community of people that are like, hey, and I, just to not just be a taker. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that either. That sounded bad, but just to contribute, I was like, oh, I've got, rainfall and thunder sounds that I've recorded. I've got sloshing water that I recorded. So I uploaded some of my stuff and just put it on a, free license. Like, you don't have to pay me or you don't have to credit me or anything like that. And then I found gunshots. I found creature sounds. I found just about everything that, I could possibly want. And some things, it's like, oh, if I reverse this or combine it with this, or, it's so great. And this is one of the things that I keep trying to tell people. It's like, it's kind of, I mean, Hollywood isn't going to do this because they are Hollywood and they have to justify their budgets and they've got to justify their unions and all that sort of thing. But independent creators, we are completely freed up to just bypass all that and create something. And it's kind of like, being a collage, or editing. I mean, so much of the movie is made in the edit, but, just like creating a collage based on some other people's stuff. And, otherwise you'd probably be hiring those people to do that stuff for you anyway. So it's just like but I mean, it works. And you get the occasional film person that'll go like, oh, I recognize that lens flare, or I recognize that audio track or something like that. And they go like, oh, they use that all the time, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sitting there going like, yeah, but that's us in the industry. The average person, that like, we tell, check this out. They don't know or care where the sound comes from, Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, like the Video Co-Pilot Action Essentials pack. You go to any independent film festival, every other film is just chock full of that shit. And I know it because I've used it myself. I see, I can spot it a mile away. But the average film, you're not making the film for the critique of other.
Yeah, exactly.
People in the industry, you're making it for the film goer. So yeah, it's certainly okay. That being said, I do advocate making your own elements whenever possible, but there's certainly nothing wrong with it, especially if it's something, like if you just want to get some footsteps fully, I mean, you're not going to make anything better than you can just download for free. You know what I mean? There's certain things that are just a waste of time. Sure, you can make it yourself, but if the asset already exists and if it's free or inexpensive, fuck it. Just spend your time on something that's going to be more valuable for what.
Yeah, and I gotta say too, I mean, I definitely advocate for that as well, because you do want to separate yourself out, as 'cause I have seen Video Co-Pilot Action Essential like smorgasbords. Like, I made this film, I'm like, you just dragged and dropped the first thing you saw into there, didn't you? And that is an overall attitude that will bleed over into everything. And
I'll say, and I don't mean to shit talk on Action Essentials. They're great, and I love Video Co-Pilot. It's a great website. I learned, but when you're using a stock element, any stock element, you have to take the time to finesse it and to match it in the shot that you're creating, so that it feels like it. I'm sure I've seen it millions of times and never recognized it because those artists use it. But when it stands out, that's when the effects artist is not using it correctly. Just dropping it in and it stands out because it doesn't look like part of the shot or whatever.
Yeah, or the other thing too is, and I'm going to apologize to the audience for a second because my dog is barking and just, Winston, quiet. Just likes to bark. What?
That was me barking.
Oh, okay. Well, I can't tell you to be quiet. I'm interviewing you. Like, shut it, Clint. No, one of the things I was also going to add is, the same thing with YouTube tutorials. There are sometimes you just, it's like you see an effect and you're like, I know exactly the tutorial they followed for that. And sometimes that's okay. And sometimes it's not, because you should make an effort to adjust the tutorial and learn something from the tutorial, not just following a tutorial step by step, but learning. Tutorials are a great way to learn what the functions are and then play with manipulating them so that they become something unique, something your own. And,
definitely.
And, but again, like I said, if you really, I feel like it comes down to if your story is strong and your edit is good, and an edit is really, I think where I always tell aspiring directors, shoot for the edit, because that's going to, people notice when the edit is choppy. And I just showed my wife, because I'm finishing up on the Quantum Terror right now, the final cut of the Quantum Terror. The audio is still rough, but I did use freesound.org and got a lot of that stuff in there. And but some of the audio still needs to be, what do they call it, mixed, and there's some music needs to be added. But one of the things that she commented on was, she's like, the edit was really good. She's like, I never noticed the edit. I was just into the characters and the flow of things. And so I figure, if your story is strong and your edit is good, people will forgive a lot. Or the average viewer who doesn't know anything about Video Copilot's Action Essentials or effects or anything like that, they may notice if, these days they're more sophisticated about special effects. But for the most part, if you keep them engaged in the flow of the story, they'll be like, okay, that shot was a little weird, but I'm still having a good time, so they just move on. But if your story and your edit aren't good and the effects aren't good, they'll get hung up.
Yeah, in my mind, what I aspire to, at least as a visual effects artist, is for the work to be invisible, and I think if, as a visual effects artist, if you're doing your job right, the audience won't stop and go, oh, hey, that was a good effect. They'll just accept it as part of the story, and so that's what I aim for, is to have it be invisible.
I want to kind of comment on that a little bit, because I've thought a lot about the idea of an effect being invisible, and I went back and forth on it a little bit. And I kind of have a theory now about what that really means. So you can tell me what you think about this. So I used to think, people would say like, well, if the effect is invisible, that means it's as realistic looking as possible. And then I thought, but there's some effects that don't throw me out of the story, but they're definitely stylized. If you're looking at Tim Burton, or you're looking at, like you're watching Terminator, the original Terminator, and you see the stop motion Terminator, it's of the era and it's stylized, and you could probably do that in CGI now and it would look a lot more smooth. But I find there are a lot of really great CGI effects that kind of you stop and go like, oh yeah, this is, that's, they're acting to a tennis ball or something like that. And I've come to realize that invisible doesn't always mean super realistic. It just means it makes sense within the realm of the artist's intent.
I think it's does it pull you out of the story? Are you thinking? I mean, it's hard for me, and probably you too, I would imagine, because you're always, I'm always thinking about the effect or how did they do that or whatever. But for your average viewer, I don't want them to stop and think and go, how the fuck did they do that? I just want them to accept that happened in the context of the story. That effect, that's not an effect. It just happened,
Yeah, exactly.
It's realistic, or it can be, as you said, it can be stylistic as well, as long as it fits in the world of the story. I just don't want it to ever pull the audience out of the story. That's what it comes down to. Yeah,
I think that's the most important thing. And it's funny too, you mentioned that as well, because we as filmmakers, and I'm sure any other anybody that really cares about what they're creating, is, you kind of also have to pull yourself back and look at it and go, am I getting too close into this? And when I say that, I mean, I've literally sometimes been down into the pixels of an effects shot, and then realize like this shot's going to be like a second and a half long, and no one's ever going to see this. And I have to ask myself, like, am I getting too nuanced? And then I'll find, it's like, yeah, you can like pause the movie right at that point and freeze frame it. And you look and you go like, yeah, I'm the only person that's ever going to care about that or notice it. And yet you can.
Yeah, you can get bogged down in those details. And I think that's a good instinct, though. I think we should aspire to have something look as perfect as it can. But sometimes, it all depends on the project. It depends how much time you're working with. Sometimes you have you're doing effects on a movie and it's got 100 shots. You got a month or two to finish them. You can't get that granular in the detail on a project like that. But there's also I ran into this a lot with Dry Blood, doing the visual effects on that, where as I know we've talked about this before. I had to remove a lot of cars from the background so that the town looked empty. And those are invisible effects right there, too, because the audience doesn't know that it was a full town and there were cars driving by everywhere. I just digitally took them out, and it was a real bastard. But sometimes in like a cleanup shot, I would get so focused on either car removal or maybe it was like a wire from the microphone, I was taking out or whatever, and it was moving, and then I would, I'd be working on it maybe one shot for like a week, and then it would occur to me, the action of the shot is the dialogue or whatever is happening over here, on the left side of the screen, and I'm fucking around with the right side of the screen the whole time, but the audience's eyes are never looking there. So it also helps to be aware of where the audience's eyes are going to go too, and that can kind of help guide you if you're pressed for time and which section of which sections it's okay to be a little more loose with than others.
Yeah, it's funny too that you should mention that, because one of the things that astounded me was there was a video not too long ago, because they have those what are those Boston Dynamics robots that they make? Real robots. This is not a special effects shot, but then a channel called Corridor Crew. They did. Yeah, they did a spoof on it. It's like, and again, for anyone that doesn't know the reference, it's the Boston Dynamics would test their robots by making them do stuff, and as they're doing things, they're like trying to kick them over and they're hitting them with stuff. So Corridor Crew did a spoof video where they're doing that. They did a CGI robot shot where they had an actor in a motion capture suit, motion suit for tracking. They painted him out, and they did a digital version of this robot, and then they did a spoof where the robot started getting pissed off and like fighting back when they would trip him up and that sort of thing. Like, it was getting more and more irritated. And there were people posting it, like clips from it on Facebook, going like, thinking it was the latest Boston Dynamics video and going like, oh crap, the thing like pushed back. And I'm going like, no guys, that's not, because people will believe anything on the internet, no matter how ridiculous sometimes. No, Steven Spielberg did not shoot a Triceratops, but anyway, I was like, people were completely fooled by that video. Some people were like, that's another one of those Boston Dynamics videos, and then people in the comments, no it's not, and I was like, still, like, it looks great. And then Corridor Crew did a follow-up video talking about doing it, and they're actually zooming in, and you can see very clearly in the zoom-ins their paint outs, like places where they had trouble, because it's a moving camera. And you did paint outs with a handheld shot for Dry Blood, and I thought it was pretty seamless, and I'm sure you could, zoom in on stuff and show me where there were issues, but you just don't notice when you're caught up in the moment of it. But yeah, even Corridor Crew, who does a great job, they start, once they zoom in, you can't not see it. But it's still, like I said, the the resolution of the human eye, it's not just what the eye can take in, it's also what the brain has time to process. And that comes down to the edit as well. And, some people overcompensate by that by, putting too much grime on the lens or doing too many camera shake moves or something like that. And, I think the best way to deal with that is just do a shot and then show it to someone and see what they notice or don't notice. Anyway, let's see. I think we talked a lot about effects, which is not the only thing I want to cover, though.
Hey, can we pause the interview for just 1 second? I just gotta run out real quick. I'll be right back.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. I'll talk amongst myself, the audience.
You can talk to the back of my chair here. I'll be right back.
Yeah, that's nice back of the chair here. So, yes, I want to say just for the audience that this is the kind of stuff Clint and I talk about all the time. There's why I wanted to keep the conversation kind of natural. It's because when we shoot from the hip, we just kind of come up with great stuff. I'm going to say out loud what I want to cover because I don't want to forget when Clint comes back, which is he did Dry Blood. It's he went with Dread Central for distribution. That was an experience. My understanding is that he's very happy with distribution from Dread Central, and he is I don't know. Is he working? He's been working on some other movie stuff. I know he's been writing some scripts, but he won't be able to talk about that. But I want to talk to him about distribution because that's the other end of it. And the point really of this conversation for all of you guys is there's so much you can do. I mean, like I said, there's free assets online. There's affordable camera equipment. There's affordable audio equipment. That you can be your own actor if it really comes down to it. Again, the lesson of his music video, just him and a camera, and music videos are they're not plot driven, but they do need to be visually stimulating and dynamic to look like. You don't just want a guy the entire time singing in front of a camera, and he managed to give the audience something really to sink his teeth into. And I did a music video. I forgot about that for Sun King Rising, which came out right around the same time as his video. And I managed to keep the audience entertained the entire time while you were gone. So
I just assumed you would stop it.
No, I'm rolling. I'm going to be lazy. I don't want to edit this. The whole thing's going to be in the dog barking, me yelling, all that sort of thing. It's just funny because I forgot I did a video for a band called Sun King Rising at the same time as you, and I was using some of the techniques that I used when I worked with Bill Oberst Jr. on Ray Bradbury Live Forever, which was projected animated backdrops behind him. So mainly they were static, but things like butterflies would fly around, or night would turn into day. You get a sunrise or something like that. We were working on cues. And so with Sun King Rising, I had a gentleman, again, because of quarantine, he recorded himself in front of a green screen. And I kind of, he'd send tests and I would say, okay, try moving this light here, making sure that the screen was lit as evenly as possible and he didn't have hot spots on him or bad shadows, anything like that. And then I did a bunch of stuff in my garage, and my friend Val Merrick did illustrations that I animated. And I would say it was I was happy with the way it turned out, but at the same time, it was one of those things. It's like, oh, I did this great video for this client, and then you come out with your video, and I'm like, I got to get into Blender now. Like, I can't just be After Effects anymore because it's...
No, I liked what you did with the animations. It was really cool on a stylistic... Yeah, the style of it was cool. Those videos are apples and oranges, though. You know what I mean? There were two different styles.
Oh, absolutely. And like I said, it's not that I wasn't happy with the video. It's just I see now, and you and I are both big practical effects fans and advocates. But I also see now that there's so much that we can do digitally that there's no point in letting. And I've said this for years anyway, but if your obstacle is I can't do this practically, so therefore I'm not going to do it, I mean, that's just the wrong attitude. It's like, get your story told you know, as your experience grows and maybe your budgets get bigger and your reputation gets bigger, then you can be a bit more of a prima donna about if you want to do it practically or you know, whatever it is. But it's just like everything. And the great thing about your video too was, I mean, to me, one of the thing I like about watching old music videos or watching old movies is, are you still there? You're kind of freezing up. Okay, cool.
I'm just very still.
Is you can look at them and you can see that they're great, and like I said, they can be timeless, but you can also see like the times they were made in reflected in them. You know, they were utilizing the tools that were available to them then, and to see your video was like, yeah, we live in the era of, you know, affordable equipment and programs and open source software. And it was like a very much a video. And I don't mean to say this in the sense of it will be dated. Rather, I don't think it will be dated. I think it's more of like, it's really neat to see what's being innovated now with what's available, which is what you did. And with my stuff, like you said, apples and oranges. I love doing puppets and I loved animating Val's work. You know, but part of it was like, what could I have turned Val's work into in Blender versus, you know, I did the old school, you know, cutting up Val's work and breaking it into layers in Photoshop and repainting in stuff, and then puppet pinning elements and adding particles. And I think it turned out great, but I think to myself, like, if I were to actually take the snake that Val illustrated and then take a model of a snake and wrap it and make it look like his illustration in 3D, like how cool would that be? Along
those lines. So I've got 2 new videos in the works. One and they're both, you know, just really big visual effects videos. So one I'm directing. I've already shot it, and I'm just doing the visual effects. But the other is being done by my friend Jim Bonner, who's the guy that really got me into working with Blender to begin with. And he's much more advanced than I am. But he took some of my oil paintings, some of the characters from those, and did exactly what you were just talking about. He turned them into these 3D characters, and it's absolutely insane to see that. To see, you know, a painting that I spent months on suddenly is now turned into this 3-dimensional thing that has life, and it's really crazy. So.
Well, okay, so two more points that I want to make, and then I promise we're going to move on to other aspects of filmmaking, but we are geeking out about Blender because I'm so excited about it. But I'm still really new to Blender, and all I've done so far is start on the donut tutorial, which is like the famous... Did you start on the donut tutorial as well?
I years ago I started it, and I never finished it, and I didn't go back to Blender until the beginning of last year.
So you started, would you recommend starting a different way or like...
I recommend starting whatever way works best for you.
What? That's a cop-out. Come on. How'd you do it?
I'll explain what works best for me.
That's what I want to hear.
What works best for me isn't what works best for a lot of people. But for me, and I learned Photoshop and After Effects and ZBrush and many other programs this way, right? A program like Blender is so massive; it can do so much. If you just start watching tutorials and hopes that you're going to absorb it all and learn this whole program, you're going to waste years of your life and maybe still not be that good at it. But what I do is I approach it one effect at a time. Okay, this is the effect that I want to do. How do I accomplish this one thing in Blender? And then I find out how to do that one thing, and I apply it, and I do that thing, and now it's part of my arsenal. And then I move on. Okay, this is the next thing I want to do, and then I learn how to do that one specific thing. So rather than just blindly watching tutorials, which sometimes I will do, not saying I never do that, but I think it's most helpful just to learn the thing that I need to do at the time when I need to do it. And then through the process of actually doing that, it helps me retain the information better than if I were just trying to cram it all at once.
So you didn't do general like interface overviews or that sort of thing. You just kind of dove in.
Yep.
That's brave. I don't know. Like, maybe I should figure out what I want to do with Blender, because right now, I think the big thing that I'm interested in doing, this is the other point that I wanted to bring up, is there's another aspect to Blender, or most 3D programs, and this is open source as well, for people who are into practical effects, building miniature models like you and I are, although you're building them and getting them in the computer and then 3D printing them out. Like, I still like to kit bash things, but there's
I do lots of physical builds too. So.
What's that?
I do lots of physical builds still too.
Oh yeah, I'm sure you do, and you've been doing it for years. But I like the idea of photogrammetry, which is, there's another open source program called Meshroom, and then I think you actually have to get yet another open source program to go with Meshroom, because Meshroom, essentially you go around an object and you photograph it in nice even light from all these different angles, and if you do it like 100 photos, or the more photos you feed in, the better result you get. But it'll take the photos of from different angles, and it will build a 3D model of that object for you to manipulate and light and do whatever you want. And you can photograph, even not photogrammetry, you can photograph like we've seen tutorials on this, do what's called extruding, like you can extrude out bricks and make it and balconies and all this sort of thing, and turn that into a 3D program. So you can take your photos and extrude or do the photogrammetry. And then, if you're not a sculptor, if you're not comfortable sculpting in the 3D program, but you are comfortable sculpting in real life, you can do that, where before you used to need a laser scanner. And, there's still things like, Steve Norrington was doing with Alec Gillis, like he had Alex sit completely still for a moment while he like rotated this camera around him with a light to get a 3D scan of his head, and there was still like a little margin of, even just like the slightest trembling or whatever can kind of not get you the best result, but
Yeah, I'm very familiar with the photogrammetry process too. The mechanical heart that's on the cover of the Last System Sin album, my friend Jim, who I had just mentioned, who's directing that video, he's a wonderful sculptor, and I actually commissioned him to sculpt that heart. So he did that as a physical clay sculpture, and then using photogrammetry scanned it in and created the digital model that he sent that to me, and I did the mock-up did the art for the album cover off of a sculpt of his actual, or a photogrammetry scan of his actual sculpture. It's great. It's a great tool to do. It's not perfect yet, and I'm sure it's only going to continue to get better. If you're using photogrammetry for something that you need to print or see in detail, you do end up having to do a lot of cleaning up of vertices and things like that. But man, it's a really cool tool to have at your disposal.
Yeah, and this is again Blender and all these other programs, like you said. Figure out what you want to do with it, because Blender is so immense. I'm seeing animated movies made in Blender, and I'm seeing visual effects, and I'm seeing hand-drawn, like frame-by-frame stuff. I recently just got a tablet, or an XP pen. It's not like it's a tablet. It's like a second monitor, but you can draw on it. And I'm having a great time with that. And, and you could do everything. You could do pre-production. You can do post-production. You can do just every aspect of filmmaking. Like you said, it's like a canned studio that you can just download if you're willing to learn it. And but I like I said, I could gush about this for ages, but now, and I'll kind of reference my own movie, The Quantum Terror, for this, and I'll reference Dry Blood for this as well, because I'm probably going to self-distribute The Quantum Terror, which I'm excited about doing. I have ideas about that. And you went with Dread Central for Dry Blood, and you've had some very interesting thoughts about distribution since your experience then, because you liked your experience with Dread Central. You said you learned a lot from it. It seems like, I don't know, like I want to get on Amazon and Tubi, which you said, like, yeah, people can do that. You don't need distribution to do that if you don't want to.
Well, yeah, it's so I went with Dread, which is a subsidiary of Epic Pictures, and they've got a great network already in place. So for me, it was easy. Sorry, just pausing for the dog. For me, it was easy because we signed the contract with them, and then they worked their magic, and they got it on all the platforms. So that was easy. There are things like Distributor and a couple other competitors where you pay them a flat fee or whatever, and they submit it to all your platforms. It's the equivalent in the music industry to something like DistroKid.
Yeah, except Distributor's toast.
Yeah, I know that one. Yeah, there's other ones like it and are questionable, but you can also go to those platforms directly yourself. I have mixed feelings about it. It's a lot of work to do distribution, and I feel my time is better spent creating things than dicking around with stuff like that. But at the same time, it's also, when you go through a distributor, you have a certain amount of costs that your film takes on that you then have to recoup out of your royalties, and that can take a while, and some films may never recoup in that way too. So you have to be calculated with your decision and go with what you think is the best. For Dry Blood, I absolutely think the best was we made the best call to go with Dread and Epic Pictures. I'm very happy with how that turned out.
It sounds like they treated.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say it sounds like they treated it really well. And what I recall from when Dry Blood came out was they did there was a lot of publicity for it. They featured it on their website for a full month, and there were screenings. I went to your screening in Arizona, in Phoenix, Arizona, when I lived there, and it was they set it up with that theater, and there was Q&A after. Like it sounds like you don't often find distributors that really seem to care about what they're putting out. And I will say that Dread Epic definitely gave your film a lot of love. And from where you're coming from, I completely understand why you're doing that. And personally, I love the creative side as well, but I kind of have a little bit of a, I don't know what to call it, but I feel excitement for the business end of it as well. I feel excitement for, learning about distribution, and I'm working on, QC, which is quality control, making sure that all the assets are prepared properly for video on demand streaming, and making sure that when you burn your Blu-rays that it's not too dark or saturated or anything like that. So for someone like you, there are great distribution offers, and for someone like options, and for someone like me, and I actually did take the Quantum Terror to Dread Central, which was really funny because they were interested in it. And then when I sent them the final cut, I said, this might be too weird for you guys, because mine is very makes David Lynch and Holy Mountain look well. It probably fits up there with them. Maybe not being as good as them, but I guess I made a good movie. I'm just gonna say I made a good movie. But anyway, I sent it to them and I said, this may be too weird for you guys, and they said, too weird for us? Come on. And then they watched it and they went, yeah, it's too weird for us. They said they loved it. I will say this. I won't say who I talked to. They said we loved it, but yeah, it's too weird for us. Like it goes. I think because it starts off like a horror movie and then it strays completely into like the midnight movie, like weirdness. And Dread Central, they have a core. They know what their fans want. Their fans want a scary movie, but they don't want to have to contemplate it in terms of, how you might contemplate Holy Mountain or Lost Highway or something like that. So I completely understand. And they offered to cover it when it comes out. So again, I will reiterate, Dread Central just seems to be awesome on all levels. But I know I can sell this movie directly to an audience. So I'm excited about the self-distribution aspect of it. So, and like you said, it's apples and oranges. You're focused on creative, and I'm kind of, like I said, I do the creative, but I also kind of like the Roger Corman type aspect of it. It's like, okay, we got the movie, and like, how are we gonna get it to the audience?
Yeah, I think another consideration too, in terms of do you self-distribute or go through a distributor, is there's a financial component that you have to consider. In our case, we had a number of investors that put in money to make the film, and though I could go the self-distribute, we did consider going to self-distribution now, at least we did talk about it, but I wasn't confident that I could sell as many copies going that way as I could going through an existing company. And ultimately, as a filmmaker, I feel I have a big obligation to put in the best effort to make the money back for the people who are kind enough to give it to me to make a film. So, that being said, now that I've released the film, I know a little bit more about it. It would be easier for me to tackle self-distribution, but I just don't know that I want to put in the hours that it would take.
Yeah, that's a consideration.
Years.
Well, Alec Gillis at Studio ADI, he used a term that I always really appreciate, which was sweat equity. And you
Yep.
brought it up with making your music video as well. It's like, yeah, it costs you $200 to make the music video because you spent that on a stand and everything else is in Blender. But if you were to actually log your time and figure out how much you would charge a client for that,
ridiculous.
Yeah,
that'd be a video.
that would be a big payday for you. And not only that, but you got to think about the equipment and the you used costs money. You're still running electricity. You got an electricity bill. Like all these things have to be factored in. And and I'm glad you brought up the investors too, because I think there's really in terms of am I going to self-distribute or am I going to go with a distributor? There are factors in terms of how much money are you spending on the movie? How much are the investors putting in? What are they expecting back? Are they, how willing are they to accept that they're taking a gamble one way or another? And then my producing partner on a few projects that I'm working on right now, Doug Mayfield, when we were talking about, for these projects, how are we going to do distribution? His thought, which I thought was a very smart way of and a safe way of doing it, is going like, well, you can consider these different avenues of distribution, but you should, when you're negotiating with your investors, you should tell them, these are the avenues we're considering. These are the risks and rewards for the various ones, and then kind of involve them in the decision of how you would go about it. So, if you're doing a $60,000 investment and you say, hey, I can self-distribute this and I am fairly confident that I can make this much money doing that, or, and they go, okay, yeah, that's great. Or say like, oh, okay, but we can go with a distribution company, like, say, just for argument's sake, not saying that they would go for it, but Dread Central, and this is the kind of deal that we've seen them give other people in the past, but keep in mind that they're going to take this much percent and that sort of thing. So you're involving them in understanding what the risk versus reward is in their investment, and therefore you're up front with them. They go in going like, okay, they can't yell at you later going, well, you told me we were going to make this much money, and because you never know.
For myself personally, I don't give investors that much control over it because I go into I try to make as much money for them as I can, and I don't make promises or let them make decisions about that method. You know what I mean? You just can't get consensus you're not going to get a consensus from everyone. I had a lot of different investors that formed the budget of that film.
You had a conglomerate of investors?
What's that?
You had a conglomerate of investors?
Yeah, and if I were to solicit the opinions on like how we should distribute it, I'm sure I would get 20 different replies, and then you're stuck with trying to please everybody. But I think part of it is that at this level, when you're doing an indie film, I think most of the people that gave me and Kelton Jones, the director, money to make this film were investing in us because they'd seen other things we'd done. They knew we could deliver, and they believed in the project. and that's why they gave us money. So it wasn't me having to talk them into, you know, I try to be as upfront as possible as you can about the risks, and I think ultimately every savvy investor knows that a film is a high risk investment, but there's also if it succeeds, it could be a high reward investment too. So, but it is a big risk because not a lot of films do succeed financially. So,
Yeah, I think that there's no for sure formula. I think it's always a good idea to kind of weigh your how much you're spending versus how much you think you could make, and try and manage that to the best of your ability. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And another point you made that I think is actually a pretty good thing to consider is that you have people who know your work. If they're your investors, they're excited about it. And like right now, I'm scouting locations for my next movie, and I talked to the owner of one location that was perfect for us. And, he just said, like, I'm just excited that there could be something shot on our property and we could watch it in a movie and go, hey, that's our property. Like, for some people, that's a real thrill, or for some people, they've seen your work before and, they may say, like, well, it'll be nice if it makes some money, but, really, I know your work and I just want to see you do the next thing. And if I can help facilitate that, that makes them happy. I know that's when we did the ADI Kickstarter for Harbinger Down, a lot of the contributors were just, people people would come and like, hey, I always want to do special effects and I love the movies you did, but, I became a doctor instead, but I've got doctor money and I can, get you some money so you can do the next thing. And, most people were very happy. You get some people who are, they complain or that, it wasn't quite what they thought it was going to be. People get a picture in their own head of what they think it is, which you can't read people's minds and you never satisfy that anyway. But for the most part, and I experienced this, and it may be different in Hollywood. I know a lot of people are more jaded in Hollywood because there's Hollywood productions going on all around them. But here in Texas, it's just like, people would come help out in set. You give them a meal, they'd have a good time. Then, they say like, hey, that was so much fun. I'm just happy to be a part of it. And, next time you got another project, call me and I'll come help on that too. So it's really kind of, it's one of those things that I think people can kind of take for granted, is that it's not just us that's excited about this. There's a whole audience, and we kind of live in the era of audience participation. You can comment on something, you can, reach out to someone on social media that you like their work and maybe get a response. And, of course that leads to sometimes you get the, people that feel like they can dictate to the creators, what they do next, because you always get those types on social media. But at the same time, it's just, I remember opening up my Instagram and seeing Greg Nicotero's following you. And I'm like, what? That's awesome. Greg Nicotero. And I don't know him. Like, I've got some mutual friends, but, it's just awesome that I'm doing something that Greg Nicotero went, I want to follow this guy. And,
sure.
That's the beauty of social media. And the same thing, like I feel like I'm nobody, but sometimes I get people messaging me just going like, I love your work so much. And, and they send me their work and I'll comment or give them tips or whatever. And they seem so happy to talk to me. And I realize it's not because I'm, some legend. It's just, I share in the same enthusiasm they have, and I'm doing something that excites them. And, that's awesome. That's a great feeling.
Totally, yeah.
And then you got a tattoo. Someone tattooed your face on them. I mean, come on.
This is true.
Which is still, like, I don't know how I'd respond to that. Like, I'd just be like,
it's very, very flattering.
It is. It's flattering, but at the same time, you're like, I don't know. Like, I would always think like, if I was John Lennon or something like that, or, Robert Smith or some, uber celebrity, But I mean, still, it's just like somebody, you did something that meant enough for them to be like, I'm getting this guy tattooed on me. I mean, that's pretty exciting to think about.
Yeah, I was real stoked. It's like, yeah, it's hard to know how to react to that. You know, 'cause it's like, oh man, I better not do anything awful with my life. Then otherwise, you're gonna...
Well, it was like, was it from Game of Thrones? What was her name? Tyrion, I think her name was.
Tyrion is the little person, Lannister.
Oh, okay. Who's the mother of dragons? That was
Cersei.
Yeah. Okay. So they were
Sorry, not Khaleesi.
Okay. Yes. So they were literally parents, like naming their babies after this person. And then in this last season, she becomes like a genocidal maniac, like killing everyone. It's like, so I get what you're saying there, but I think you're pretty safe. I mean, anyway, I know we're kind of going far field with that, but it's just, like I said, the general message and the things that I'm excited about are, you know, we can create this stuff. And like I said, the cheesy motivational speaker line is, and I've made videos about this too. I mean, we just like, you know, the quality even of our cell phones now is worlds beyond what the first movie cameras were. I mean, you know, Cecil B. DeMille with a cell phone, you know, would have been in heaven. And here we are with Blackmagic cameras. They're affordable, Blender, you know, green screens now. The other one we didn't talk about is, which isn't open source, but is still available for free, is Unreal Engine. And, you know, they're using that on The Mandalorian. And now LED screens are becoming a thing. And I'm going like, well, how long before I can afford a wall of LED screens? Because that would be to skip over green screen keying and just go straight into the edit because there's an LED wall behind my actors and it looks great. I mean, I fully expect more productions to be doing that because The Mandalorian, I mean, that's still a high budget show. I think they spend something like $15 million an episode, but still, you know, they're really making it work. They're saving themselves, you know, huge location moves. I mean, I think the latest episode was actually shot, maybe some of it was shot in Simi Valley because it looked like Rocky Peak to me.
I'm not current. I think I'm behind an episode or two.
Oh, okay. No spoilers except that it looks like Rocky Peak, you know, on one of the planets in Simi Valley. But anyway, you got to check it. Robert Rodriguez directed the latest episode.
I love him.
And he actually said, again, not spoiling anything, but he's like, I got a 19-page script, and it's like the way I shoot, it was probably going to be a 16-minute episode. So he asked, it's like, can I pad it with more action? And they said like, yeah, go ahead. So Robert Rodriguez really went to town on this one. Right. Of course, without, you know, he can't be too bloody and he can't, you know, it's Disney and it's Star Wars. Sure. So but I was really impressed with the episode he did, especially since the episode before that, which you may not have seen, I liked, but I felt like there were some missed opportunities. And I actually did another video where I was like, I'm a little worried about how this show is going. But then Robert Rodriguez kicked it into high gear, and I was like, okay, we're good.
Yeah, I did. That was the Rosario Dawson one, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I did see that one. I like that one.
Okay. I enjoyed that episode too. It just, there were some aspects of it, and if anyone wants to see that video, it's on the channel, and it's got spoilers. I won't spoil anything here, but I was just kind of like, there's some missed opportunities here, and they seemed like obvious missed opportunities that I felt like, I don't know, it just seemed like the episode existed for exposition, which was weird because there are lightsabers in that episode, and I want to see some cool lightsaber stuff and you know, some intense action. Anyway, again, going off, but like I said, I mean, we live in an era where there's, you know, stuff like that going on. I think that Hollywood is going to start wising up and learning how to do high quality yet lower budget productions. And I think The Mandalorian's kind of starting to fall into that.
Well, if you consider the fact that each episode of The Mandalorian is like an hour-long standalone film,
yeah.
So even if you doubled that, and let's say it was 2 hours, so double the budget and $30 million, that is still significantly lower than the budget of any of the newer Star Wars films.
And you've got everything that the other Star Wars films have. You've got the spaceships, you've got the lightsabers, you've got awesome special effects. I mean, it looks seamless. There was the one episode where they're on Tatooine trying to hunt down that, I don't know, they called it a dragon, but it was like essentially a giant sandworm type creature.
Yeah.
And I mean, the CGI was flawless. I mean, it again, talk about special effects you don't notice. You're just wrapped up in what's going on, and you don't stop for a moment and even say that's CGI.
Yeah, well, you don't watch those episodes and think, oh, hey, it's on an LED screen and all. You just buy it.
Yeah.
It feels like.
Well, what I do is, because I'm into the whole LED screen thing, I look for the seams. Like, you're like, oh, where's he? He's about to walk into the LED screen now, and then there's a cut, and you go like, okay, I figured that out. But if you're not looking for it, you're never going to know, because they really work around it really well, and that it's done so awesome. And there's some scenes where you see the behind the scenes, you're like, oh no, okay, they actually made a set for that, or they were outdoors shooting on location. But I don't think they go flying around the world for that. And yeah, you're absolutely right. And I don't know about you, but the Disney Star Wars sequels were just, I'm sorry folks, I just thought they were garbage, like absolute garbage. And
I mean, yeah. Well, you and I have different opinions on Star Wars, so I won't get too far into it. But for me, it's the original the original 3 films before they were fucked up, and Rogue One. I'll throw that one in there. Those 4 films are awesome, and in my mind, The Mandalorian is the best thing to happen to Star Wars since those 4 films, and everything else I just don't care about.
Oh, hey, and that's the great thing about The Mandalorian is that it works that way. You don't I like the prequels, I like the Clone Wars animation, and it references that stuff, but you don't need to have seen it for the most part. There's some episodes where a name is dropped, or like in the Ahsoka Tano episode with Rosario Dawson, she references someone from the animated show, and I'm thinking well, the audience isn't really gonna, some people are like, oh my god, that character's gonna be in there, and other people are going, that name means nothing to me. But for the most...
I never watched any of the animated stuff. And to be honest, I didn't even watch the last film.
Oh,
I just stopped caring.
You missed a smorgasbord of I don't even know is a good word for it. It's just
the one prior to that was How to Be Polite. Just not what I wanted to see in a Star Wars film at all. All this being said, I have not been the target audience for a Star Wars film for many, many years. And so I recognize that although the newer stuff may not be my cup of tea, I'm no longer who they're, trying to acquire as a customer. They're looking for those customers that will also buy all the toys, which used to be me, but isn't anymore because
Yeah, well, their toy sales tanked after the sequels. There's a whole story behind that, which I won't get into now. But yeah, I would only recommend the last movie as something to watch if you want to shake your head at I don't know. I can only say it's like somebody watched some video game, what do you call it? The storyline, when you the intermission, or blocking on what they're called. Not the gameplay, but the
cut screens.
The cut screens, yeah. Is essentially it's like a cocaine fueled fever dream. If you gave cocaine to an 8-year-old and asked them to write a script, it's just nothing made sense, and I don't think there's any target audience for that. I don't think that it was so completely nonsensical that Anyway, I'm not here to bag on those movies. I'm here to talk about what we're capable of creating.
Yeah, indeed.
But anyway, I think, I don't know. It's one of those things. We always have these great conversations, and I wanted to record one for our audience because we come up with great stuff. And there's so much more I'm sure we could talk about to get excited about. But I don't want to keep you all night, and I'm sure the audience at some point is going to zone.
Already not.
Yeah. But I mean, again, I'm seeing great stuff, and I'm having people contact me and send me, like one guy sent me, he had, like, when he was in high school, he recorded a Indiana Jones fan film parody. It was meant to be funny, and he contacted me and he's like, hey, I put the footage into Photoshop and Premiere, and I cleaned it up. I improved the quality. He's like, years later, he's like, I'm going to use After Effects to complete the movie, do a new edit, put in some new effects. He's like, it's just a practice thing for me because I'm home, but I've got this footage from when I was in high school. And he made this like rather charming, like high school student film out of it. And it is what it is, but it was a great way for him to cut something together and practice. And we both entered short film contests. You did the Dread Central one. You did a pandemic one. It was like a zombie one that was good. And I did one about a mad scientist working from home called Roger. And again, we did those with a cell phone because that was the rule, wasn't it? You had to do it with your cell phone.
Yeah. I like that.
What's that?
Because I was happy with the way my film turned out. Like, it was okay, whatever it was. I did it in like 48 hours, and it was done on a cell phone. But I hate that it's on a cell phone because now, other than I wouldn't put it in a festival because it was shot. It just doesn't look good. You know what I mean?
But it kind of, it does look good enough though. There's sometimes I look at the cell phone movies and I'm like, that could work.
Yeah, it's fine, but it's not that it's bad. I'm just talking about my own. I'm not speaking for anyone else who entered the contest. But it's not that it looks bad. It looks okay. But I know how I could get it to look if I shot it on a real camera too.
Yeah.
And I know, and the fucked up part about that being a rule in the contest is it would take me just as much work to shoot it on a good camera as it would the cell phone. And it would have just looked better. So I should just put the cameras next to each other, had the edit for the contest, and then had the other footage I could go back to make a real film out of it.
That's not a bad idea at all, actually. And I got to say too, the one of the things about oh crap, I lost my. I had a good point. It just left me in the middle of saying it. It was cell phones. Cut
versus other cameras.
Versus other cameras. It's gone.
And I should also say this: that the newer phones, the cameras are just more and more insane. I have a kind of older model phone, so
yeah.
That when they do with it, so
I even shot some stuff. Now I could get away with this with the Quantum Terror. There were a few shots that I did on my cell phone, but one of the things about the Quantum Terror is I kept going through as the movie progresses. I deliberately changed the quote unquote film stock of what's going on. It kind of fits part of the mood of that. But I had a really good point. I'm so sad that I lost this point. But you shot that on your cell phone, and I felt like when I did Roger, a lot of it was about the lighting. And I was very happy with it. I think that I had it well lit, which made a big difference. Cell phones, obviously, like as soon as things start getting dark, you get that graininess.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Again, I want to go shoot some more solo stuff. I'm thinking about doing Roger too. I don't know. One of the things I'm thinking about doing, and I kind of discussed this with maybe I discussed this with you or other people, but I have like a character that I play. And I thought about maybe just doing some little bits for my YouTube channel with this character against a green screen, kind of like just to be able to play that stuff off and like I said, build miniatures, photo scan them, animate them, just have those little kind of not dedicate to a full feature or even a short film. It's just be able to do those bits and experiment with them and or like I said, people taking old footage and putting it together. Some people are just making movies out of stock footage, and people are finding ways to, make movies where they're directing people over the internet. And I'm not just talking about movies like, I know there's one, Doug sent me one, I still haven't watched it yet, I forget what it's called. It's like a guy that's searching for his missing daughter, and it's all plays out over the internet, like Skype calls and that sort of thing. And
I hear those.
Yeah, it's a great idea, but how many times can you do that before the audience gets the bit, But you can, if you get, you can have people talking on the phone and, get a voice actor on the other end, or you could have, if you've got enough people that have a good enough camera to get in front of a green screen, you can put people together in front of the green screen. If you really want to do it, or you can just animate it all in Blender, get people to just send photo scans of their head or deep fake actors in, and then you play all the parts and then have them do the voiceovers. There's just so many crazy things you could do if you were really that dedicated to getting the story done. And and like I said, there's a lot of the things I'm saying are like, you're really going out of your way to, there are easier ways to do this stuff. It's a lot of extra work.
But, I think the point is, or one of the points is that if you're willing to put in the time and effort, you can make a movie. Anyone can make a movie as long as you're willing to put in the work, If all you have is a phone and the free software, a phone and free software, you can still make a kick-ass movie if you put in the hours,
And even like in the 90s, man, could you imagine being in the 90s or early 2000s and somebody just came from the future and just handed us this stuff, how stoked we would be,
Oh, yeah.
Just
in the 90s, I was working on, I was using, my brother had like a mini DV cam, so I was shooting all my films on that, and then cutting them together with the camera and another VCR. So I'd have one VCR to record the edit, and then playing, using the camera and another VCR. It was just like, it's what we had, what I had. And I was lucky just that my brother had that camera even, or I would borrow cameras from other people. But, nowadays you have a better camera on your phone than was invented back then.
Yeah.
So.
I look at my first documentary, which was at Comic-Con. I shot it with a DV camera and my wife's 8-megapixel camera that had a video feature on it, and I held them one in each hand, and I cut between them for interviews so I could, shorten interviews. And then I was so thrilled that Windows Movie Maker had like Ken Burns effect, and that you could overlay, a layer of footage over an audio voiceover. And then, Windows Movie Maker, I guess at one point figured out that was, people were using other programs, so they stopped doing that. But that's where I got my start. And, now it's just, it just seems like the sky's the limit. And I guess I've kind of burned out like the point we're going to make, although I feel like there's something that we're missing. But we covered everything. We covered Blender, Unreal Engine, the photogrammetry, green screen versus LED screen. We talked about distribution, self-distribution, which again, even whichever you choose, I mean, those were options that before you needed Hollywood permission to get, there was no video on demand, and getting into a video store, I mean, you still needed to be a reputable production company. So, I mean, the sky just seems like the limit now, and it's so exciting to me. And I think, like I said, COVID and lockdowns and that sort of thing, it's definitely making things harder, but, it's like you can still, get, people who are close to you, or, a few people together. And I think that's the other thing. You're going to see smaller casts, or you're going to see people, like I said, they're going to be using digital face replacement. Like you might get somebody who becomes like a face replacement Like, I think at some point we're probably going to see Luke Skywalker appear in The Mandalorian, and it's going to be an actor, and they're going to have like taken Mark Hamill's digital face, and you won't know the difference. And that technology will be available. It is already available to us, even, it may be to varying degrees and depending on our skill set, but it just seems like, and I'm not talking about competing. I'm not one of these people, even though I think Hollywood is kind of getting knocked out of its place completely, as like the hub. It's become global. The major productions aren't going away, but I think they're going to be taking some cues from us because we've been doing this stuff and they're realizing that the technology is available. So it's all going to be reshaped. And like I said, there will always be bigger productions, big budget movies. But now we don't have to, we can compete with them, not in terms of, for box, like competing like neck and neck for their box office, but we can be in that playing field and we can compete for some audience time, where they look at our movie versus, do I want to watch Star Wars again? Or do I want to watch Dry Blood or, The Quantum Terror or something like that? And video on demand, like I said, what I love about Tubi is people are rediscovering a lot of the old grindhouse horror movies, all that sort of thing. So I guess that's all I have to say about it. I think we've run a pretty good amount of time. I don't know if there's anything more you want to add to it, but I guess I should ask the last thing. Is there another? You're doing the music videos. Is there another movie, or do you have ideas about how to do the next one?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of irons in the fire for a potential next movie. I don't know which one it's going to be. The answer is I don't know what the movie's going to be until funding comes through for one of the things that I have floating out there. You know what I mean? There's always a possibility of just going and making a movie on my own and doing a no budget thing. But, I think in my heart of hearts, I want to be making big films. Not like Star Wars big, but I want to be working with millions. Low millions. I think. And I think. I don't know where I'm going. Rambling on that. I don't know what the next film's going to be, but I'm hoping that I can get a bigger budget than the last film, and then just continue to increase budgets and get hire more and more talented people as I go along. And I could tell you privately about some of the things I have going on, but I don't want to say it in an interview yet. So.
No, of course not. And the same with me. It's like the movie that I'm scouting locations for and getting together right now is a bigger budget film than The Quantum Terror, and then the one I have after that is a bigger budget still, although still smaller. We want. My goal is to keep the budgets minimal because I'm kind of I'm a capitalist. I want to make these movies turn a profit. I am also an artist, and I think I can balance the two. And of course, if I do get offered millions of dollars to make a movie, then I'm definitely not going to say no to it. But I think at that point, I'll probably be working with a producer that I'm going like, okay, it's your job to make sure it makes money, because if I'm dealing with that much money, then I'm going to, be focused on that. But I always want to make the next one. I'm always thinking about the next one. And of course, animated, I've got an animated project that I'm working on at the moment again, which my audience may find out about soon enough. I've been talking with my producer, Doug Mayfield, about maybe kind of letting that cat out of the bag, because it's a series, most likely. And it's, again, miniatures, Blender. There's a particular person, model that I think would be great for it, and I'm trying to kind of slowly, like, she's receptive enough to listen and nicely tell me no, and then I go, well, can I come back and tell you, show you? And she's like, oh, okay. I was like, okay, cool. Like, it's, I think they'd be great for it. Sometimes you find that face and you're like, this could be the face of that project. And that's the other aspect I like about this is you eventually do get to work with, you figure out who it is that you're going to work best with, and you get to kind of go with them and see the amalgam of the talent coming together. So anyway, I think what's happening is I'm starting to talk you out. I think we're starting to fade on this interview. So I'm gonna say thank you. I'll keep you on the line for a few minutes longer when we go, but I hope my audience enjoyed this conversation, just kind of listening in.
Thanks everyone for listening.
I think it's a good conversation. I don't know. Maybe it's because I like listening in on conversations like this that I think other people will want to. But, I do this channel for these conversations, for this excitement. When I talk just straight to the camera, it's not, I like having that communication with my audience as well. But of course, I'm riffing off myself. It's nice to have someone to bounce these ideas off of. I love doing the interviews, and I'm going to do more tutorials and demos and that sort of thing. It's all about keeping the excitement for it going. And as we enter a new era of entertainment, I think video on demand is changing that. I've said that many times on my channel as well. It's going to evolve how we tell stories in ways that we yet have not anticipated. And that's exciting to me, just the idea that we can discover new things that nobody has done before in any other mode of visual medium, television or film or something like that. There's going to be changes, and I'm excited about that to find out what that is. So anyway, any last words for the audience?
I guess if you want to know more about what I'm up to, check out systemsin.com. Sin with a Y, or look for me on YouTube, and
links in the description.
Oh yeah, links in description.
Don't forget to like, share this video, subscribe, hit the bell for notification. Yeah, on both of our channels. All right, have a good one, everyone. We will be back soon.